Welcome to the Take a Mulligan podcast with your hosts, Brian and Kenny Mulligan. We hope to encourage you not to quit and keep going. If you're at that place where you just want to stop and give up, don't. Second chances can happen. Try again and take a mulligan.
Hey, welcome back to the Take a Mulligan podcast, and we're so glad you're joining with us today. And, we talk about a lot of subjects, and I know we're just getting rolling because this is our 10th or 11th episode, so we're just getting rolling as a podcast. But there's a lot of topics that we talk about in society that, like, there's a taboo attached to it, like religion or politics. Like, you're not supposed to talk about these things, right? Any others, Brian, that come to your mind?
Two main things to never bring up in conversations, right?
And yet they could be some of the most exciting conversations if we just allow ourselves to
intriguing at least.
Yeah, at least enter into dialogue about it,
Yeah.
So any other topics that you can think of?
They're probably the most hot topics. Politics would be the other one. So politics, religion, and money, like they're the main three that we don't talk about, right?
Yeah.
And I think money, our tags are kind of talking about, faith, family, fitness, and friends. And again, this fits into a lot of different categories for that. Almost everything, like you talked about in the very beginning, right? About having fitness is not just health fitness. It's fitness in our finances, fitness in our relationships, that kind of stuff. So this is a great topic that falls into it. So we are going to dive into talking a little bit about money today. So it might be a little controversial for some, but let's hit it up. Yeah.
So, and the other thing, you talk about controversy and stuff like that, or I don't know, the thought that came to my mind was that, oh man, totally lost it. It was like we were, keep going, man.
Right.
So come back around.
So think about, like, those are the three main topics that I could think of that we do avoid talking about. Why do we avoid talking about money, though? It's one of those things where you never ask somebody how much money you make. Maybe your best friend, you kind of know what maybe they're making, or at least in a ballpark, but it's never like a conversation I would have with my best friend and say, hey, so how much money are you making a year? Or what are you bringing in a week or a month? Or, it's one of those conversations we just don't have, I guess, because it's such a personal thing. I know for me too, I'm probably that way too. Like, well, I don't want to let you know how much money I make, because then one, you're going to know and could judge me somehow, or think, well, why are you spending money on this or that when you make that amount of money? Or if you make that amount of money, why don't you have this or that? Or so I guess it's because that personal thing that people just don't want to let go of. It's a pride thing, I think. And I think in our culture, we've really shut that down. And when you think about, like, with your kids and just growing up, our parents, relationships with siblings, like, we don't talk about it. Like, it's not like we say, hey, how are you doing with money? And that could be in the opening to an honest conversation to say, listen, I'm really struggling, or, hey, I'm doing pretty well right now. Are you okay? Can I help you out? I think the only thing that keeps coming to my mind is just the pride of it, that we just want to keep it so secretive.
Yeah. Or you hit on, I think, a little bit with the judgmental. Like, if I tell somebody to struggle with money and then they go out to dinner, it's like, well, why are you going out to dinner? It's like, well, we had money aside. Right. We had a gift card. We had, a lot of reasons where we might have had extra money to get put aside. But so when I think, let's go back a little bit, because when we started talking about this topic, I was like, man, when did you start thinking about money? Like, when do you, like, the whole topic of money? Like, what are some of your early thoughts about it? Like, I think I remember, like, going back to Easter eggs. Like, didn't our grandmother put, like, quarters in some of the Easter eggs or something like that? So, what's your thoughts early on about money?
Yeah, I think, I guess, that would probably be the first one, right? Because always at Christmas, and I feel like sometimes at Easter, I know definitely at Christmas, our grandmom would, on both sides, would always give us that little money envelope with, like, money in it for Christmas. That's all we got. I remember at Mama Mulligan's, she, like, had them hanging up on the banister. It was all taped with their names on it. We'd pick the envelope, and I remember probably $2 when I was young, and then $5. I think I was excited when maybe I got $10 when I was, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 or 10. But you're right, that was probably the first real taste I had of, oh wow, this is my money. I can do something with this money, I guess. And I don't really remember. I think we did get allowance. I don't feel like it was a consistent thing or it was a regular thing. It might have been every once in a while, like here's a couple bucks because you mowed the lawn or something. And I feel like we had chores to help out,
Mhm.
but I don't remember like it was rewarded consistently with you did your chores this week, here's your money. So probably
Mhm.
the first was that, and that was, just a freebie.
Yeah. I mean, going off the topic a little bit, but I like what AC said in one of our previous podcasts where he was like, they don't give their
Mm,
kids allowance because they're part of the family unit. This is our family. We all chip in, we all help
yeah.
out. So they're going to pay you to help out when it's part of your responsibility as part of the family team, and I like that concept. I thought it was good. But, I honestly don't remember allowances. Now, maybe mom and dad started out with
Mm.
you younger guys and we got gypped out. I don't know, but we got a paper route. I mean, I had a
maybe,
paper route
yeah,
at
maybe you
11
did.
years old,
Yeah,
and I was
yeah, that's how old I
making,
was too.
I mean, I was thinking out of the gate, I was probably making $25 a week. I mean, for 11-year-old, what do you do with $25, right?
Hmm. And at that
Spent
time,
on comics. Yeah, at that time, I
yeah,
spent a lot of money on
yeah,
comic books, but but someday it'll be worth money. I know it. I just hold on. So
you had a lot. You had a big collection of those.
I still have them. I still have like three huge boxes of them.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, yeah, they're all in plastic. Because
You
I'm
might
trying
want
to
to
put them
check
in
the value
plastic
on
and
those
stuff.
things these days.
Every once in a while, I do, but you know. And then I remember,
But I
and then
remember following you guys.
in the paper route,
I remember following you guys because you had the paper out. You guys had, you know, your jobs when I mean, by the time I was 11 or 12, I got my first paper out at 11, but I was kind of following your guys' lead. I thought, well, this is what I'm supposed to do, I guess. I turned 11, got so excited I could get a paper route. So I started with that and then, again, started making money like you did. And I did that
hmm
all the way up till I was 16 and got a real job. But I also did a lot of work with you guys when you were working at the print shops and stuff. I'd come in the summers when I
right?
was like
Come and help
13,
out.
14, 15, and I would spend like an 8-hour day there a couple days a week. And then it was like, that was crazy money because again, I'm 13 or 14 ish. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
you're probably
wow, I
making.
just made $100 in a week for working like 3 8-hour days or something.
Yeah, yeah,
And it was pretty crazy, but I kind of loved it. And I guess that's where that work ethic stuck to me early.
yeah. Yeah, and I think when I think back to the paper route too, I think that was such a you were learning business. Like I wish there was even
Hmm.
more mentoring along with that to realize you have because we had to go pick up our papers, right? And we had a bundle of papers. And then because we got those papers, we had to pay that bill for those papers at the end of the week. Whether we delivered them, stuffed them in the garage,
Right.
it didn't
Right.
matter because if our customers didn't get them, they wouldn't
Yep.
pay us. But then we had to go and collect the money from all those customers. So we were money collectors, right? We
That
were
was the worst.
I know it was
Yeah.
terrible. We were salesmen because sometimes you're trying to get new customers, right?
Hmm.
That's a lot for a 12, 13-year-old. Yeah.
But what a great experience. Like I wish that was still available now because
Yeah.
like you said, I mean, it's really kickstarted my work ethic for sure. And I mean, I remember making money at 12, 13, 14, and I think my first purchase was a stereo. Because again, you guys
Okay.
had yours and I was like, well, I want to buy a stereo and I saved up my money. It was probably like, I don't know, 80 or $90 or something that I spent on it, but I
Hmm.
saved for a while. And I remember getting my double cassette, radio player stereo when I was like probably 14 years old. It was a great purchase, but it was nice because I earned the money to do it, so I went and spent it. And I was usually saving pretty good at that point because I didn't really want to go blow it, although we had plenty of opportunities to go arcades up at 7-Eleven and buy Slurpees and candy and all that kind of stuff when I
Sure.
had my own money that I was making.
That's funny you mentioned a real job at 16. Like as soon as you could get a real job, it was like, okay, I'm out of this paper route business. And that's how I felt too. It was like,
Yeah.
I can't wait to be done this and get a real job. Not realizing like there's so much, I don't know, the sales whole aspect of that is such a more, I don't know, you can make a lot more money and stuff in that kind of an industry sometimes. Not paperboy, but in that kind of a job actually than a lot of jobs are if you wanted to. And
Yeah.
it's funny how we went right into the okay, I'm going to work 8 hours a day, pay me for each hour kind of thing mentality. It's so funny how we just
Right.
ditched that whole mentality of make your own hours. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's pretty weird.
Yeah.
So how do
Yeah.
you think like your view of money progressed going from like, okay, 16 and getting a job to, I don't know, maybe even into early married years and stuff like that?
Well, I think for us, I mean, again, I mean, our parents did everything they could to make ends meet, and we never had a lot of money. I mean, we did fine. We had stuff we needed. We went on one vacation every year to the shore, which sometimes I don't know how they afforded that. I mean, Dad was always working extra jobs, whether it was night school
Yeah,
during the regular school year, whether it was summer theater that he got paid for, whether it was summer schools he got paid for. He always was trying to make extra money somehow. He did framing for a little while for his pictures and stuff. So I think again, his work ethic of just, doing anything he had to do to make sure he had enough money for his family. And then I remember when Mom went back to work for the first time because I was the youngest. And when I got to a certain age, she decided to go back to work. And I mean, she was working terrible shifts. I mean, she'd go in like 3 to
yeah, no,
11, whatever job she had. And
yeah,
so I think the work ethic that they put in, again, it wasn't like we were becoming rich because they were working all these extra jobs. It was just enough to get by.
yeah,
And, as I got older, I kind of realized like I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to be able to not have that much stress that they had of trying to work 4 or 5 different jobs just to make ends meet. So
hmm,
I think as I got into, 16-year-old age of, working retail or whatever for a while, and then did that for several years, I still tried to save. I was always trying to be good at savings. And I think I
hmm,
did okay for a while. It wasn't until I kind of got into college age that all of a sudden it was like, wow, now I got like this huge expense for my car that doesn't really run, and all these other expenses that would pop up. And then, I was a senior in college when I was getting married the week after I graduated. So now we're jumping into marriage already, without even having a full-time salary. So it was very different. I think we had a different outlook because when I graduated college, yeah, we literally got married the week after. Kim was working full-time already. So she was really, bringing in all the money. And then I went right into grad school and really couldn't hold much of a job at all because it was such a full-time grad school program.
yeah,
So she pretty much carried us through those 3 years. So it was just a weird feeling for me because I really wasn't contributing financially at all. I knew that would switch soon,
hmm,
but it was kind of a weird feeling. So we still had to be real tight on what we spent. So I never feel like we really got out of that tight. Like we got to hold on to this money a little bit because this bill's due and we don't have a whole lot of extra for here or here. And then it's quick and easy to start getting into credit card debt, and then that takes
yeah,
you in a whole different direction.
yeah,
So
it does.
for me, I think it really started to morph into realizing quickly at a young age, 22, being married, having a house, having the expenses of a house. All of a sudden, it went from living at mom and dad's house with hardly any expenses at all to now, wow, now I got to pay for everything. And technically, I'm not making any of it. It's just Kim. So
Yeah,
um, thank God that she was able to do that and willing to do that, and got us through those times. And then what was the most exciting was when I finally graduated school, and now I finally had my eyes on a full-time salary. And when I looked at that,
yeah,
I was like, wow, this looks pretty good. So combining the two together, we were like, wow, this is going to work out well, until a couple months later she's pregnant, and then that ended. So I think our option of being able to have the two salaries, which I think would have really honestly set us up very well financially in the beginning, even if we did that for 2 or 3 years. I think we had the
yeah,
right mindset of working it the right way. But again, God had different plans, and we went down to one salary, and then just expenses grew from there. So
yeah,
I think the change I had of an attitude as I grew was, I'm making a little bit of money. I'm kind of still saving it because I don't want to spend a whole lot, because I want to put it away and save it. And then got right into okay, now we got a whole lot of house bills and life bills to worry about all on our own. And now we have to figure it out quickly.
yeah.
How about
And
you?
it's hard. It's hard. I mean, well, we did. I mean, similar to you guys, because you guys had the desire to live on one income too, to try to leave Kim home, right, with the kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we did the same thing with
That was
Julie, and
important
that
for
was
us.
our
Yeah.
yeah, that was our goal. And there's a lot of sacrifices that are made in that process. The smaller home or a
Hmm.
smaller apartment or whatever else it is, you give up. A lot of luxuries. You don't go out to dinner all the time, if ever. you wait till they get a gift card and you celebrate on an anniversary or something.
Yeah.
And, we did all those kinds of things. But, money can still be tough because what happens when a car breaks down and there's not enough to cover those expenses, And, that's a real challenge.
Right.
When you look at the, let's go to the world view of money. How do you, I don't know, what's your perception of where the world views money?
I think it's a very high view. I mean, I don't know. Look around. It's like everybody just wants to make more than the other person. I think it's very infrequent that you find somebody that says that money's not a problem. It's not an issue for them. And those people, I think, that say that are people that have a lot of it, that it doesn't have to become an issue. Because if their car breaks down and they need to spend $600 on a new brake job or whatever else, they don't even need to think about it. They have it, they pay it, and they're done. And I think for people that are fortunate to have that, it's that's a huge thing. And if you've had that, earned it, worked up to that, were raised into that, however that works, I think when you have that kind of capacity to just say, you know what, we want to go on a vacation on a cruise that's $6,000 for our family, we're going to go next year, and they don't even have to think about it. That's a very different mindset than somebody who's saying we can't go on a vacation this year because it's just too tight, or we needed to buy a new furnace this year and now we can't do that. And then you also have the other side that says, well, I'll just get a credit card. I'll buy the new furnace with my credit card, and then we'll still go on our cruise. And now they're living off of credit. So I think the idea of a lot in the world, I think's view of money is, let's just live off of credit. And how many people do that? And now we're in a tremendous amount of debt. We've been up and down through that personally ourselves as well. And it's a hard hole to dig out of when you start digging in deep. And I think there's certain people that really just, they want that lifestyle. They want that image that, that they are wealthy. And you often wonder sometimes with certain people, is their wealth all debt because they just bought everything on credit and now they're living on credit? I don't know how they're paying their bills back or their credit card bill if they maxed them out because they needed to have the latest, greatest thing to make it look like they have more money. But I think that's a scary thing. And I think that's taught early of credit. I guess for us, I had a lot of influence from you guys. You guys were very influential in mentoring certain things with that when I was becoming an adult. And I think the one thing that I feel like you guys were helping me out with more was, try not to get into credit card debt. If you need a credit card for emergencies, that's it. It's for emergencies. And initially we did do that. And then all of a sudden you find out oh, now we don't have money for this. We got to use the credit card again. So it is hard. It's hard to manage when you don't have as much as you think you should. And then of course, I think a lot of us live way beyond our means. So, we got too much a month at the end of our salary, right? So there's too much left at the end of the month and we don't have enough money there. So
and it obviously affects different people different ways, and some people do live beyond their means and are getting more into debt based on that. Others are trying to live just a minimal life and yet still can't keep up, and especially with inflation right now. And I know you can't even believe the numbers because, they leave off major figures when they give you inflation numbers just so the numbers are lower. But most of us realize there's a lot of things that literally doubled in price. They doubled in price, Now, some of that came back down.
You see it everywhere in the stores. Yeah.
You do. And, things that used to, somebody said around here, like, $9, $10 for a jar of mayonnaise in the food stores. It's like, where did that even come from? Like, that's absurd, right? It is really crazy. I mean, you can't even go out to fast food anymore for under $10 for just a simple little meal, for one person.
Right.
Just one person.
But then here's the thing that I'm always amazed by too, though, is that everywhere you go, it's crowded. You go to a restaurant, it's crowded. Fast food lines are crowded. So even though the prices have gone up, even though we may not all be able to afford that, we're still buying it. So either people are living off of credit when they shouldn't be, or it's just the convenience of it because they don't want to cook. So just, let's just go out to dinner and put it on a credit card. So it's I think it turned into a different mentality for it because that's something that people normally, I don't think would have put on a credit card unless that's how you manage your finances. That there's a lot of people that pay everything on a credit card, get all the benefits and pay off the credit card at the end of the month instead of paying the regular bills. And in that case,
Yep.
sure, like you're going to go out to dinner and put on a credit card. But if it's a family that's trying to go out to dinner and they just don't have the money in their account, so they're like, well, let's just put it on the credit card now. Now there's another thing that they probably normally wouldn't have put on there, but because of the cost of everything, they're doing that more. So you looked up some stats, pretty staggering, talking on this topic about debt.
Yeah. So total U.S. household debt is nearly $18 trillion. 18 trillion. Now, obviously, that includes mortgages and stuff like that. But in credit card debt alone, we're at $1.115 trillion credit card debt. Trillion. I don't even think we can wrap our minds around what a trillion is, right? So that's Americans that are literally in debt with the high interest rates, which is absurd. Like, I mean, I don't know. We were growing up. I remember hearing, oh my goodness, it's like 10% or something like that on credit cards. So never get a credit card, And now that you just get a notice in the mail. Oh, by the way, we changed our rates. It's now 32% or something outrageous. And it's like, they used to be called loan sharks and it was illegal years ago, but now the banks can just do it. And, they charge these exuberant rates, they said that the debt grew by $800 million in 2023 alone, $800 million. So that's where a lot of this has come from just in the past year.
That's just a year ago. A year ago, we've gotten this much more debt.
Yeah. 1/5 Americans have maxed out their credit cards so that they have no other way to turn. So if the car breaks down, there's nothing to go to because they're maxed out, 78% of Americans, this blew me away. 78, this is by Forbes magazine. 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. That's astounding.
That is
one
huge.
check away from bankruptcy.
Almost 80%.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow, almost 80%. Paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
Well, I think going back to like when we were going back to when we were growing up, like what else do you remember about learning about money from mom and dad? Like I don't really remember much. So do you remember like them helping you understand like, hey, there's savings accounts at that time. There were CDs at that time. How do you save money? What do you do with money? Do you remember any of that stuff from them?
That's a good question. Cause I think like, I remember, mom and dad grew up like the whole thing of debt was you don't go into debt. Like, if you had to get a car, it's like, oh my goodness, we gotta take out a loan to get a car. Now it's like second nature. Oh, you're getting a new car. Of course you are. It's just on that. But I remember talking about CDs. I think I might have done them a few times as teenagers. You had a CD for Christmas money. You put $5 in a week or something like that to a CD. Earn a whole extra $5 at the end of the year or something back. And that was actually as we get more into finances too. That was my idea. That's how you save money. Just put it in a savings account. I never learned about stocks. I never learned about investing. Mom and dad were very conservative. Right. I mean, they were very, conservative when it comes to, don't take risks in anything. Like it was always,
definitely.
You don't want to risk it. You don't want to risk it. You don't want to risk it. And so I think a lot of that came into you and me when it comes to finances. Like, well, don't buy that home as a second home and rent it out because, well, what happens if you can't rent it? You know what I mean? There's that mentality of, and not that you shouldn't think through and be, and be practical about things, but there wasn't a sense of it, taking risks, Now, when it comes to money, let's flip the switch a little bit. How do you think faith community or churches handle the whole money topic? Okay, because we could explode over this one over many different issues, but obviously, I think Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I think it's a great question. I think if you look around and I think unfortunately the church world has such a negative connotation from the outside world. People that don't go to church, that don't know much about church, I think a lot of times they paint this picture that either all churches is these, huge evangelical churches that are thousands and thousands of people. And the guy leading the church has a $6 million home and he's got a private jet and all these things. And yes, I think that is the case in some, and I think there's definitely some of these mega churches that are really doing it the wrong way and exploiting people and doing all kinds of crazy things. I've never been part of that. I don't
Yeah.
really know much about that, but it's out there, and I think that really tarnished the Christian perspective or the outside perspective on how Christians handle money. But at the same time,
Mhm.
I think, having been in the church I'm in now for many, many, many years, and watching how they handle finances has been just amazing. When our
Mhm.
finance team has handled like a new mortgage on a new building, and we have a 30-year mortgage that you're paying off in like 7 years, it's unheard of. And what I found out from them when they would discuss this is they would say that the banks love working with churches because the churches are very good about their finances, and they really are good
Wow.
stewards of what God gave them. And that's what we're commissioned to do, is be good stewards of what God
Yeah.
gives us. And, they're able to pay back more. They're able to use, again, investments at times, interest on investments and stocks and stuff like that. And they'll pay down more on a mortgage. So we paid our church mortgage down very quickly. If you look around again in this community, there's some of these other big churches that are completely debt free. The
Yeah.
one we heard about, Life Church, Craig Rochelle's church, he's got multiple campuses, and he is
Yeah. I think
debt
it's at
free on
40
every single one of them.
locations, right?
So to have
Yeah.
multiple buildings,
Yeah.
42 or 43 locations
Yeah.
in multiple
Yeah. It's
states,
crazy.
and to have every building paid off, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I
Good.
think, again, for us, it's always that one passage in the Bible that always gets us is money is the root of all evil. And that's not the actual verse.
Yeah.
It always gets misconstrued. It's for the love of money is the root of all evil.
Yes. Yes.
I think there's a
Absolutely.
lot of people in the secular world and the church world that do amazing philanthropic, I can't say that word. They
We
do
all know what you
amazing
mean,
things
though.
with their money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Giving it back, giving it back. Even people that aren't churched are very generous with their money at times. So it's not just a church
Mhm.
thing, but I think, again, that love of money is what really gets people in trouble. And again, I think that always comes back as misquoting that verse. And again, I think some people think that we're real prude with our money and we're real conservative with our money, and that's definitely not the case for all of us. I mean, I've had plenty of money troubles over my lifetime, and I'm a Christian, so it's not like every Christian does great with their money. But I think as a
Yeah.
body, if you're doing it the right way, can do really well with it.
Yeah. Now, coming from a non-Christian perspective, if you don't understand nonprofit organizations or businesses or anything like that, I think it's easy sometimes to look at an organization like a church and say, "Oh yeah, they just want your money," and with no concept
Mm-hmm.
of how much money it costs to operate.
Yeah,
I mean, I've been looking at church
right.
recently, and yeah, you got a church of a staff of 10 people or 15 people in some of these churches. If you just take a medium salary, based on their experience and their education, because a lot of these people have master degrees, and here they are in a church setting now, and not that they should make exuberant salaries or anything like that, but it starts to add up. You got 10 people at a master's degree level
Mm-hmm.
in organizations that's growing, rapidly growing. You want it to be well. You got facilities to match those. You're spending a lot on ministries themselves, and they're not cheap. You send a bunch of, a couple hundred teenagers to some event, and that costs a lot of money. It's not cheap. Um, so I think you could add up pretty quick. But what I guess I want to think about is, how do you think on average the church, we were talking about attitudes of money and stuff like that. How do you think the churches respond to it and talk about money? Like what are some of your, I guess, experiences in that?
Of what they talk about, or if they talk about it.
Yeah, if they talk about it, do they avoid it? What's some of the perceptions around it when you come to church life?
I think, again, it's a topic, at least in my church, that does not get talked about very often at all.
Okay. Okay.
Occasionally they'll throw out, just, again, reviewing the tithing aspect of giving back to God a percentage of what God gives to us. That's taught throughout the Bible. That's, what we believe as Christians to be. We need to give money back to God because it's not our money, it's His. So we're going to give money
Yeah.
back. And again, that's the money that helps fund the church and function the church, well enough.
Yeah.
And obviously people are making different amounts and are willing to give different amounts in that way. Some people don't give at all. So I think it's always that struggle in church of like the tithing aspect is really, it's a tough thing. And again, for those listening that don't really understand or know what tithing is, it's giving 10% of your gross salary,
Yeah.
whether it's a weekly, a monthly, an annual. It's giving that 10% back. And again, that's been biblically the sound since the Old Testament. It's all throughout there. So it's definitely something that we try to follow as believers in Christ, is that, again, this is not our money. You gave it to us and we want to give it back to help further your kingdom. That's the whole concept of it.
Yeah.
And again, there's plenty of churches where you might have 20% of the people that are going there are the only ones tithing. So if you're trying to run a budget
Yeah.
off of that, it's not going to work too
That's
well.
hard.
You know,
It's
it's like
very hard.
having 20% of accounts receivable coming in for a business. It's not going to work. So I think that's about the only time I really would hear our church talk about money, is a tithing kind
Mhm.
of, you know, either a series or just one sermon on it, but it's never talked about much as far as like how we should spend it or what we should do with it, what it should look like.
Okay.
So it is a topic I find is kind of avoided. How
Which
about
is
you?
interesting. I say it's interesting because, on the one side, you're praising your leaders for handling money, and I would say the same thing about that church when we were there. I thought they were very, very good. I mean, they wanted to make sure their pastors were treated well based on the culture and everything in the industry that they were in. They want to make sure they had the right benefits. They wanted to make sure there's a nice margin and stuff like that. I was always impressed with that part. Um, but it's interesting. So here on one side, they're handling it very well, but we're not talking about how do we
Mm,
handle it and are we teaching about it. And a lot of people don't realize this, but Jesus taught about money more than any other topic he ever talked about.
yeah.
More than heaven and hell, he talked about money. And it's like, wow. And he really called us to steward what he has given us. And I think some of the, coming from a pastor perspective, like I think in the church, a lot of times we're afraid to talk about it because people feel like, well, we're talking about money again. And so maybe once a year or twice a year, you can have that giving statement, where you challenge people to give.
Hmm.
Um, the other thing, I think we have this perception, or we put off this perception, that almost that wealth is not good. And I don't know how to
Hmm.
describe that, except that, and maybe if some of our listeners are listening, maybe they can relate to that. But it's almost this perception. Maybe it goes back to the verse you had shared, that, like, okay, it's okay if you make some money and stuff like that, but if you're too wealthy, then, like, you're pursuing money and you're not pursuing
Hmm.
God, kind of mentality. And I mean, you have some very, very successful Christians, or even other faiths that are very successful, and yet have been able to give so much towards the work within their church or the religion or something like that, because they've been blessed to be able to have that. And I think it's funny how we're afraid to talk about it. Like, such a big topic that not only affects our personal lives, but actually is tied to spiritual life too.
Yeah. And I think that, to go back to that, like just to have people understand too, though, that if it's a healthy church, they're not going to be asking for your money every week when you come in.
Yeah.
They understand that we, as members of the church or as regular attenders of the church that call that church our home, are called to give back to that church. So that's where we're going to give. If you come into a church to visit, at least my church and a lot of other good churches, they're never going to sit there and say, hey, don't forget to give today, or, we want your money today. They should
Yeah.
never really be doing that, because again, it comes back to the heart for that. If your heart's not right, why would you want to give to something you're not sure about, for one, or be bullied into it? And you shouldn't be. If it's a good church, they should not be bullying you into giving or
Yeah.
taking your money. And two, going back to the idea with, again, being wealthy and being of faith, or, certain religious, certain faith that we have, that we're not allowed to be, rich, or not allowed to have wealth. It goes back to the heart again. If God blesses you with a lot of money, again, it's your heart that's going to tell you what to do with it. there's plenty of
Mhm.
Christians or faith-driven people that are going to do a lot of bad things with that money, not give it back to people, not do anything with it at all, and spend it extravagantly. And there's lots of other people that, if their heart's different, they're going to say, no, I know I'm very wealthy. I'm going to live within my means. And, if I feel comfortable doing this or that, but I'm also giving it back here, I'm giving it here, and, not just holding on to it to live lavish lives. And I think that's the big difference.
Yeah. Now, I know, you mentioned good churches don't bring it, don't beg all the time. I think a lot of
Yeah.
churches will mention, hey, here's a way you could give if you're giving today,
Yeah.
boom, and then they move on kind of thing mentality. But yeah, it's not this continual, okay, we're so glad you're here again. Now will you give again and again and again? Because it just, again, like I said, if
Yeah.
people are faithful in their faith, whatever faith that is, you're going to just naturally give towards that because you want to see it to grow,
Right.
So,
And
so
I think for us, yeah, and for us as believers, I think it's hard not to have a biblical view of money, just like everything else we have, because that's what we believe.
mhm.
And I think it's a healthy view. Like you said, Jesus talked about money more than anything else. So how are we not supposed to learn from that or lean on that? And I think that's a healthy thing to have for us. So what do you think is a healthy view of money, or on this topic, as we strive towards, changing the way we view it, or changing the way we talk about it, or how we talk about it? What would be a healthy view going towards that?
I, I think first we have to start talking about it and
Mm,
not be afraid to talk about it. And it doesn't mean you have to get personal to talk about it, but we can
yeah.
talk about it in terms of, it's a tool like anything else. I love the phrase where Jesus basically says, why aren't you using money to influence people? Like, why are you as a one who follows me not using your money to influence your friends and family that are not Christians? Why aren't you being the one who gives? I mean, it's like, if you bring donuts into work, not that you should be bringing donuts because they're not that healthy, but you're the one who brings donuts in every Friday morning, and everybody knows, hey, Joe brings donuts, and that's what he does. And, known for your generosity, and
Mm,
known for giving. And so I think that's a healthy way. I also think, like, we live in a culture, and a lot of it taught like this, and that, basically go find a good job, right, and get the best pay you can. And the government loves when you have a normal job where they get to take all their money up front and all the tax money and all that kind of
yeah.
stuff, and because that's where you pay the highest taxes. If you're on an hourly wage or salary, they don't like the whole 1099 income where you own your own business and all that kind of stuff, because there's just way too many write-offs. They like the person who is, just go to your job, make your money, pay the government, all that kind of stuff, with the hope that, okay, at a certain age you're going to retire, right? And hopefully you have enough for retirement, because we talk a lot about that. I mean, I a lot of financial advisors as friends that, that's what they're trying to continue to tell people, try, how you get enough for retirement. And that's the way the world thinks, right? And I think, you and I were introduced to something the other day that I think flipped that switch for me a little bit. And
Hmm.
I thought it'd be neat to, as we're wrapping up this whole topic and stuff like that, to just talk about that a little bit, maybe just to whet the appetite of people of a different view of money that maybe we should have, that is counter to what is the norm in our society, right?
Hmm.
And so we went to an event, Brian and I, and actually one of our kids and their wife, and Brian, you brought your wife Kim, and Julie came with us
Yeah.
too, and that was really cool to experience. So I don't know, want to share a little bit about what the event was, and maybe just what you walked away with, like maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great event. It was a little bit different than I think what I was expecting. They had a lot of great speakers, just on the topics of encouraging you, and kind of, what are we here on this earth for? What is our purpose here? And what are we supposed to do with this life we've been given? And they definitely dove into some financial aspect things. And again, it's stuff that I never really thought of much, I think. And I think their perspective on it was very unique. I don't think I do it justice by trying to explain it without having experienced it. Because
I'm with you
you know,
too.
they did it in such a way that it made a lot of sense. And you know, these are very wealthy, very successful people, you know, that were talking to us. And I think pretty much all of them got some of their wealth in these one of two ways. One was through real estate, you know, investment in real estate, and the other was investing in stocks in the market. And these
Yeah.
are two areas that are completely foreign to me. Like you said, growing up, we didn't have any exposure to that. I think the only thing Dad
Mhm.
had as far as investments was his pension. I don't even think he had any kind of 401k or IRAs or anything else. I thought he only had pretty much his pension he was leaning on.
Yeah.
So to have that aspect, and I know, you know, I know a lot of people that dabble in real estate, that dabble in stocks and market and that kind of stuff, and it's always been such a foreign world to me. So for me to try to understand it with the rest of my busyness in my day and life, and you know, it's one of those things I never really thought about. You know, could this really work as, you know, some extra income? And I think that's what
Mhm.
really opened my eyes. So I'm actually very curious to learn a little bit more about it. I've always wanted to dabble with the stocks a little bit. I just really never knew exactly what direction to go in because nobody ever taught me anything. I never learned anything in school about it. I never learned anything from my
Mhm.
parents, even any of my good friends. Like we never talk about, hey, are you doing stocks? You know, this and that, and you know, playing the market and doing that stuff. I've never ever been very interested or had any idea where to start from. So I'm kind of very interested and excited to learn more about this avenue, and see where it goes. So, what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I think going back to what we were talking about earlier, I find that because we don't talk about money as a culture, it's not like you run into
Mm,
somebody and you start becoming friends and they ask you the question, so what do your investments look like? What are you planning for the future? And you know what? Like those
mm,
conversations just don't come up. And I always wanted somebody to come alongside me and say, you know, not just beyond the whole, you know, save money and don't go into debt kind of mentality, but what are you doing to go beyond what you have when it comes to finances? And I think one of the greatest analogies, apart from, because there's a lot of ways to make money, right? And but I think one of the great analogies they gave was the bucket versus the river analogy, and that was
mm.
really powerful.
Yeah.
That and if anybody's listening has ever read Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, great book. He talks about the four quadrants of income, and I think that's called what he calls it. But um, and he dives into that a little bit. But this concept that our job is our bucket, right? And so you go and you make money and you put it in the bucket, and then the bills come in and you take money out of your bucket, right? And you always hope that there's more in your bucket than the bills coming in, right? To pay for that kind of stuff. And so you continually just put money in your bucket, take it out of your bucket, right? And you know, at the bottom of your bucket is the stuff you're saving, right? And that's the stuff you're saving for retirement, all that kind of stuff. And hopefully that gets a little bigger as you get closer and closer to retirement. But it's all this bucket mentality because you're going to your job, you're earning money, and that goes in the bucket, and then you go back to your job, earn money, it goes back in the bucket. That whole concept of if you just keep doing it, but what happens if you can't do it? Like what happens if something happens and you can't fill that bucket? Like you lose your job
Mm,
for 6 months or a year or 2 years, right? And all of a sudden you can't fill your bucket. And then you hope there's enough in the bottom of that bucket where you've been saving that there's still more. And all of a sudden they said, well, what if we saw it differently? That you know, if you take you know a cup full of water out of the bucket they used to describe, it said you know that bucket's going to go down, right? The water level is going to go down. You take 2 cups out, it's going to go down more, right? But if you take a cup of water out of a river, does the river go down? No. You take another cup out of the river, does the river go down? No. And so the concept was moving from the bucket mentality to a river mentality of what are we doing in our lives to produce streams of revenue that are producing for us all the time, regardless of our bucket. It's apart from our bucket, you know. And I think it's something so simple. I went to go visit a friend today, and he said they rent out the bottom of their house. It's all a fishing apartment, all kind of stuff. And you know, maybe when the kids were growing up, we didn't get into all the details, but you know, that was a great playroom and all kind of stuff. They converted it into an apartment, all kind of stuff, and now they have income coming in from that one thing that is there every month. Like that's not their bucket. That's their river. That's part. I mean, it's probably just a little trickle of a stream, but it's something that they are gaining revenue that should they lose their job, they still have that coming in, right? And that was really wild to me to start thinking, wait, okay, we got the bucket. You're doing okay in the bucket. But if you could create a river, and obviously it probably starts with a trickle, and then it comes into a little creek. And then as years go on, it comes into maybe a little more faster river, and then hopefully, faster stream, and then a river. And, but I don't know. Do you remember that concept they shared?
Yeah. I mean, it was powerful to understand that. And again, the river is constantly flowing. So having that kind of, income or wealth or options, I guess, was very powerful to understand, rather than, like you said, go to work, punch in, punch out, come home with your paycheck every day, do it over and over and over again for what, 30, 40 years, then retire, and hope
Yeah.
you had enough to make it. And according to some of the stats they were sharing, the amount of money you need for retirement now is just not going to cut it anymore, because
I know, it's
it's,
astounding.
the way everything is, the way, different things are, with, a lot of money that people still lost, during 2008 and some other time periods, that, they don't have the same investments they've had before. And there's a lot of factors, but I think just understanding that, like, there are other ways to have a steady flow of things. And I think opening my eyes to that was helpful. And hopefully we can share some more about that as we go on to some future podcasts here.
Yeah.
So kind of winding things down here. When did you think you took a mulligan when it comes to finances? What's one time you did that?
Wow. I think there are a few times we got to do that. And because we've owned a few homes along the way as we moved. And I think with each home sale, you get a chance to, restart a little bit, because you pay off your mortgage and you pay off some debt. And, and we've experienced a lot of medical debt over the years too. That was always hard to pay off. And, that was a part of that. And so it gave you a do-over. It gave you a start to, okay, now I got a mulligan, right? I'm going to take another swing, and let's start again, and let's see how we can do. And so, yeah, I think that was probably one of the bigger ones. How about you?
I think for me, it was probably a time when we were kind of struggling, early kids, again, credit cards, ran into a lot of credit card debt, and just kind of were drowning, and decided to do one of those credit card consolidation things, debt consolidation. It was terrible time. Killed our credit for a while, but did definitely take care of the debt. They basically knocked it down, negotiated all of it down to a certain amount. That was definitely still hard at the time, because obviously if we had that kind of money, we would have been paying our credit cards off.
Yeah.
But they knocked it down to a certain amount that then once we paid that off, it was done. It was a weird time, because you basically lost all credit cards. So if you had an emergency, you had nothing, because you had the credit card or credit took quite a ding for a while, longer than I had hoped or thought it was going to take. So we paid this lump sum, took care of all our debt, and then basically started over from there. So of course we did acquire some other credit cards along the way for emergencies, but again, it took a while for our credit to come back around. So it was a mulligan, but I wouldn't say it was a nice one. It wasn't like anything that we're like, yes, now we can go. Now we did this wonderful thing to do over.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a big financial do over. So that's probably the biggest one I would recommend, or I would state.
So I guess as we wrap up, maybe we could just encourage our audience that I think one of the things that, obviously you and I are in a business together on the side. And I think one of the things that maybe people could start looking at as they think of, hey, I could use a mulligan when it comes to my finances, because you're struggling right now, things are tough, is you got to come up with a side B. You got to come up with a plan B income, or even a plan C income. You got to have some other sources out there that are bringing in revenue, bringing in some funds, and with the intent that it's not, it's not like you're selling, cookies on the side on the weekend to make a little extra money. Something that will eventually gain some revenue in some way, shape, or form, that is working for you when you're not working. And that's what your goal is. I mean, somebody writes a book, or sells a song, they're earning royalties on that, and they're doing that when they're not singing it, right? We're listening to it, and many of us probably never will write a book, never write a song, but there are a lot of things we can do to plan for that plan B income, and so let that be a mulligan for you. Start searching, start looking for. There's a lot of things out there. Be very careful. but take a mulligan and swing again, and go try something else on the side while you're working your job and hopefully enjoying your career.
We know everyone can use a second chance or a do-over. So take a mulligan and try again. Thanks so much for joining with us today. Make sure you follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Like, click, and subscribe.